Today, the world stands on the brink of a colossal turning point. We all think that it's still far away, but it's not. Russia could win the war in Ukraine, and that will change everything. That will change a lot. Your life, your wallet, and your children's future faster than you think. Let's break down what it means for Russia to win in specific territorial and political terms. I'll try to explain this to you in detail, including possible agreements and the real consequences for Ukraine and for the world. First, just the facts. Russia can either capture all of Ukraine or hold only the strategic areas in the south of Europe. Every decision has consequences. Even today, events are happening on the front line that could change the economy, food markets, and international alliances. And yes, we will talk not just about the war, but about how it affects our lives, our security, and our future. In a couple of minutes, I'll show you how one simple U.S. bill is connected to this conflict and why it will affect each of us. Not just in theory, yes, really. If you think that your dollar is protected, that's an illusion. And within 10 minutes, I'll show you why even your savings could become worthless after Russia's complete victory. Now imagine millions of people who are forced to leave their homes. Not just Ukrainians, the impact will be global. The irony is that many in Russia think, we've won this. But victory comes at a huge social and economic cost. And now the second surprise. You will see how this conflict directly affects the political situation in the US and Europe. Exactly how will remain a mystery for another 2 minutes. But this is something you absolutely need to see. The economic blow will not be local, it's global. Prices for food, energy, oil, metals, everything will go up. Who will really benefit? State corporations, oligarchs, those who already control the resources. Who will lose? People like you and me. You and I, every ordinary person. In just a couple of minutes, you will see one shocking fact that turns everything you knew about world politics upside down. All right, let's talk about what scenarios are possible. I mean the scenario of development. There's one scenario, a complete takeover. Russia completely controls Ukraine. The EU and the US increase sanctions. Millions of refugees. Global markets in chaos. Scenario 2, partial takeover. Russia holds strategic areas. Ukraine resists. The frozen conflict keeps the West on edge. Scenario 3, a frozen conflict without any, so to speak, strategic advancement. Long-term instability. The possibility of pressure from the international community. Ukraine is gradually recovering. And now, surprise number 3, the hidden detail. Regardless of the scenario, the key blow will come to the global security chain and the economy of US and European influence.
Первое.
Russia uses its resources as a political weapon. The weakness of the West encourages other leaders to act aggressively, rising prices, migration flows, political radicalization. All of this is already on its way to us. Russia's victory is not just a war on the front lines. It's a global game where only a few win and millions lose. What does it mean that only a few win? This means small groups or structures that actually benefit from the conflict. State elites, governments controlling resources, oligarchs, owners of strategic assets, energy, metallurgy, agriculture. Large corporations that can profit from rising prices, arms supplies, and logistics. In other words, these are not ordinary people. These are the ones who already have power and influence. They use the conflict as a political or economic chess game, exclusively, and you might be very surprised, for their own interests. Now, what does it mean for millions to lose? These are real consequences for ordinary people and entire countries. Millions of refugees. Loss of homes and jobs, rising prices for food, energy, and housing, social and economic upheaval, instability in life and security, political radicalization. People are forced to take tough measures or change their views under the pressure of circumstances. You might ask how this works in the context of Ukraine and Russia. If Russia wins the war, either fully or partially, strategic players gain resources and political influence. At the same time, many people in Ukraine, Europe, and even in the US feel the impact through rising prices for grain, gas, and oil. There's also the flow of refugees, geopolitical instability, which affects the economy and politics. If we accept the reality that Russia will not leave the territories it has already captured, Donbass, southern Ukraine, part of Kherson, and possibly Mariupol, then the best outcome for the whole world is a managed, stabilized, frozen conflict that minimizes further losses and global upheavals. Let's break it down step by step. Territories and the status quo. Russia holds the captured territories but does not expand further. Ukraine retains control over the rest of the country, Kyiv, Lviv, and the West. A formal agreement on the line of demarcation may be established, internationally recognized as a temporary status, similar to Transnistria and South Ossetia. Why is this the best scenario right now? The conflict doesn't spread any further, and the world gets a chance to prevent a full-scale escalation. Ukraine remains a state with institutions, an army, and an economy that are capable of gradually recovering. For those who are thinking right now, oh my God, how terrible, I won't watch or listen anymore, just watch until the end. Economy and global markets. Russia gains strategic resources with limited benefit, but does not control all of Ukraine. This means that the main export of grain and metals remains possible through the free Ukrainian ports. Prices on global markets will fluctuate, of course, but this way a global food catastrophe is avoided. Sanctions remain, but the world is gradually adapting to the new normal, that is, Russia's economic isolation from the West, the main benefit. Ordinary people in Europe and the US experience fewer shocks than they would with a complete takeover. The economic consequences are manageable. Support plans for Ukraine and neighboring countries are possible. Social and humanitarian consequences. Millions of refugees have already left Ukraine, but a new mass migration has been avoided. If the front line stabilizes, I mean. Life in the territories controlled by Russia remains difficult. Repression, control, but fewer casualties than if the entire country were fully annexed. Ukraine can begin recovery and internal mobilization to protect and support the population. The main thing is that hope remains for the return of the territories in the future and for the restoration of Ukraine's social capital. International affairs, geopolitics. Russia remains a local occupier, but the international community gains a tool of pressure. Economic sanctions, political isolation, diplomatic pressure. NATO and the EU strengthen the defense of Eastern Europe, but avoid direct war. The scenario shows the weakness of the aggressor without full reward. This prevents a massive escalation of war in other regions. So, the best for the world is a stabilized conflict zone in which Ukraine lives and develops, while Russia does not gain full control over strategic resources. The world order remains a partially protected term for other authoritarian regimes. That is the best outcome under the conditions where a complete withdrawal of Russia is impossible. It is the preservation of Ukraine's independence wherever possible, deterring the aggressor through diplomatic, economic, and military measures, minimizing global disruptions, food, economy, migration, security, and the long-term perspective. The world shows that even partial aggression has a price and does not pay off completely. Even if Russia holds on to the captured territories, the world wins if the conflict does not spread further, is managed, and international pressure is maintained, creating space for recovery and future negotiations or some kind of actions. Yes, even if it now seems that Russia is steadily holding the captured territories, but in 20 years a lot can change. So let's break down some realistic long-term scenarios, as they say, to wrap things up. Sanctions and isolation can have a long-term effect. Technological lag, economic stagnation, investment shortages. That's what I'm talking about when it comes to Russia. The younger generation in Russia may become less loyal to the current policies. This will lead to internal pressure on the leadership. Long-term crises, energy issues, demographics, and budget problems may force Russia to cut spending on maintaining occupied territories. This could have an impact on Ukraine. The new leadership in Russia may agree to negotiations on returning territories in exchange for lifting sanctions or international guarantees. This could be part of a long-term compromise with the West and Ukraine. Migration and population decline in the occupied territories may make them economically and socially difficult to manage. Young people, new generations who grew up under Ukrainian influence or with Western experience, may form local associations. After 10-20 years of occupation, the social and cultural identity in the territories may lean toward Ukraine, creating conditions for a peaceful return through a referendum or agreement. In 20 years, the world may experience a new global order. China, the US, the EU, NATO. The balance of power is changing. The global community may exert strong diplomatic pressure, blocking the integration of these territories into Russia. Investments in the reconstruction of Ukraine are possible, as well as pressure on Russia to compensate for the damage and to stimulate negotiations. A possible effect for Ukraine is that international agreements and security guarantees will create conditions for the peaceful restoration of control over the territories. Russia may agree to the gradual return of the regions in exchange for reduced pressure and economic incentives. In 20 years, technological and military developments may change the balance of power. Cyber weapons, drones, intelligence, smart systems. Ukraine may use new opportunities for pressure or control without risking massive losses. In summary, let's see what we have. Even if Russia holds the captured territories, then, first, economic and political pressure over decades may weaken control. Second, social and demographic changes may incline the population toward Ukraine. Third, international pressure and new global realities will create an opportunity for the peaceful return of the territories. And fourth, technological progress gives Ukraine new levers for defense and restoring control. In other words, in 20 years after all, the situation is not static. There is a possibility to regain the territories if Ukraine preserves its statehood, international support, and readiness to adapt. Ukrainians have shown the world unprecedented courage and a willingness to defend their land. Compare this with the history of Europe. During Hitler's time, many countries, including France and Belgium, capitulated under the onslaught of a powerful enemy. But Ukraine has shown that strength is not measured only by the size of a country or its army. Russia, which many considered invincible, turned out to be a country with enormous internal problems, without a clear plan or understanding of what it is doing. Write in the comments how this changes the balance of power in the world. Russia turned out to be, well, in some sense, a colossus with feet of clay, or as the Chinese say, a paper tiger. That's all. Goodbye.